Hello, everyone. Welcome to this panel. As Ash said, we're talking about data centers and AI. We've got a panel here. They'll introduce themselves as they take their first question. So, a bit of background on data centers and where we are at the moment. Data centers have been a growth sector sort of globally and across Africa for the past few years, and then with AI coming on top of mind, it's been even more so. Globally at the moment, data center install capacity sits at about 40 gigawatts, with this estimated to grow to about 100 gigawatts in the next 5 years, and potentially 200 gigawatts in the next 5 years after that into 2035. AI is forecast to be anywhere between 30 to 40% of that demand or that growth. And with a typical construction cost of around $10 million a megawatt, that'll give you a good idea of the size of this market. Although I see Wendy sitting in the crowd here, she'll know how to pull me up on that $10 million, and she can give you a bit more granularity to that detail if you want. Africa, on the other hand, Africa at the moment, or let's say towards the end of the year, will have about 500 megawatts of installed capacity. And while we're coming off a lower base, and in the next 5 years, estimates vary, but we could be up to a gigawatt of capacity, and then another 5 years after that, another gigawatt. So we're doubling every 5 years potentially. And where is this capacity? At the moment, and even into the future, we're looking at 60 to 70% of this data center capacity is going to be built here in South Africa, and then 85% of that is what they call in the Big Five clusters. So that's South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, and Morocco. So data centers are a market that's clustered in these markets. Interestingly, this growth, while we've had some good growth, Africa's the data center landscape has actually fallen on a global scale. That's because the demand and the build in Europe, US, and APAC has been so big the last couple of years. So our slice of the pie has got a bit smaller. So in today's panel, we're going to try and unpack this a little bit, ask some key questions around data centers in Africa, and in particular, is demand outstripping supply? Like, are we underbuilt? Are we overbuilt? Where are we at? How can we deliver this capacity sustainably? Like, we've got a lot to build. Where the opportunities are they city centres? Is it regional? Is it somewhere else? And probably most importantly, how are we getting the power to these data centres? Because any discussion you see about data centres these days invariably has some discussion around the amount of power, because we are building data centres that are 10, 20, 50, 100, 300 megawatts. So that's a lot of power to get to one site. So, like I said, as I point questions to the panelists, they'll introduce themselves. And our first question is demand outstripping supply? So DC, I might put this to you. I know you've been looking at a couple of deals here and there. I'd just be interested to hear what you're seeing in deal flow, maybe over the last couple of years. Is it going up? Is it going down? Where do you think we are with it?
Hi, everyone. My name is DC Dumse. I work for Standard Bank, the real estate finance business, looking after East Africa. Thanks for your question. So in terms of transaction and activity in the data center space, we've seen a pickup of a couple of trades. We've concluded one ourselves a few years ago in West Africa. We've had various engagements with a lot of players across East Africa, as well as southern Central Africa with Mozambique, and we are seeing an uptick in data center activity. And I think the previous panel, they spoke about how the traditional asset classes have now expanded to alternatives, and that's where we bucket it. So we are seeing a lot of activity in the data center space, some of it driven by, I guess, the continent's geographic location, where Africa has got a young population, but over and above that, it's centrally located to service a lot of other markets where they have the capacity to and not limited by, I guess, regulation.
Okay, that's good. And then just maybe a follow-up, because I want to come to you as well, Marjorie, on this one. Like, what kind of structures are you seeing, just from a finance side? Because we can build data centers in a few different ways. Our market still is a little bit immature in that we see a lot of the data center operators trying to design, build them themselves, but I think as we get more and more capacity, we're going to see more and more developers involved, and we'll see sort of a developer-led model or something like that. What have you been seeing so far?
So what we've seen is, to the point that you made, so there are operator-led models, but there also now an opportunity for developers to also participate. The reason why you're seeing a lot of activity from developers understand the local landscape. They also hold the land in the various markets and understand the construction life cycle. So we'll see JV structures coming to force. We'll see developers putting up the shell and core, and then you'll see the operator come in and put in all the IT infrastructure. So you're seeing opportunities where you can put structures against leases or whether they partner up. But those are typical structures that we've seen.
Brilliant. And then, same question, Marjorie. What are you seeing over in Kenya? Are you seeing developers lead data centers yet, or is it still an operator-led market?
Marjorie Kivuva, good afternoon. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I run a professional services firm that provides legal and tax structuring for investors. So what we are seeing a lot is that they are still operator-led because of the capital required for these data centers. But developers are interested in entering the market, especially after COVID, because we've seen a lot of interest in terms of diversification. As my colleagues have mentioned, the office space has shrunk, and there's a lot of push for affordable housing, and some investors may not be interested in that sector, so they're looking to diversify their real estate portfolios, and this is through data centers. Kenya is very well positioned in that kind of market because we have very good mobile penetration, broadband facilities, the undersea cable. So the developers are now starting to think of providing land and building shell and core for providing data centers for operators to take them up as tenants. Another thing we've seen is that there's co-location, building a data center that can have multiple ISPs or cloud providers using that data center, which developers are now interested in because that increases the revenue, the ROI they get from the data centers. Another development we've seen is an added layer of looking at, instead of just looking at the location, what are the legal and tax structures they can look at, like using special economic zones to come up with a data center that can bring in good ROI, because if you build one, especially like in Kenya, we have tax incentives on corporate income tax, we have tax incentives on import duty, and VAT zero rating for the equipment in those data centers.
That's a good point on the incentives and taxes. Like data centers do like SEZs where you can get them because these buildings are very equipment capital intensive. If they can get into an SEZ, invariably they can save on import taxes and stuff like that. So it's definitely a thing to think about. And then, Shamsha, where do you think this is going then? With Turner and Townsend, and where do you think we're going with this? Is this a model that's going to keep going like this? Do you see it going differently? What do you think?
No, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I must congratulate that on Friday afternoon I see such a good turnaround in Mother City. So thank you for everyone. Let me fit my inclination a bit so that I can see you nicely. So I am Samsher Singh. I am the Regional Director for Clean Energy Transmission representing Turner and Townsend. We are one of the global leading advisory and P3 management consulting firm. So on your question, definitely we need to appreciate that Africa is a young continent where more than 60% of population is in the age of 25, which is triggering the digital transformation and attracting and giving confidence to investors. Of course, we do have challenges which needs to be addressed in a more robust manner. So if we look at where it goes, as we stand, we are still at an initial development stage, but definitely based on the potential which this young population and the digital transformation is presenting to global fraternity, definitely there is a traction we are seeing in terms of investment. And if we address the challenges, whether it's infrastructure challenge, aging grid, constrained grid, or the regulatory, so definitely we have a strong potential in Africa to grow and scale up from this initial development stage to a fast growing pace, where although if you look at statistics, we stand on the lowest quadrant on the holding the capacity of data center, but definitely there is a potential that if we, when I'm saying if there is a proper coordination between public and private sector with robust planning, definitely there is a big potential and growth prospect.
Yeah, that's a good point. That public-private, I'm not going to call it PPP, let's call it PPP light, but there definitely is, for these bigger projects, there definitely is an opportunity for private to work with public. And I think, Madri, in Kenya there's some good opportunities around the geothermal, and I think there's a data center that's being built about
in Olkaria.
Yeah, and that's
So there's definitely an opportunity for private-public partnerships, and in Kenya we have I think 90% renewable energy opportunities, and as we know, data centers require quite a huge capacity for power and reliable power. So there's a push to have developers or operators tap into that power opportunity by building off-grid networks for power through independent power programs. So you can build your data center and have your IPP involved in providing power privately to the data center. So there's a lot of opportunity in that. I know Microsoft is building one next to Olkaria, which produces geothermal power. So that power may not necessarily be a high cost at that point. And you're allowed also to do off-grid power solutions like solar power. So that really helps in thinking about your capex as you build the data centers.
Yeah, that one's an interesting one, because that's about 100, is it about 100 kilometers from Nairobi?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's about 100 kilometers from Nairobi, and then Turner and Townsend are working on one that's in Uganda, which is near a geothermal as well. Like, it's the two interesting examples. They're not the norm because they are out of the cities, but I think we'll see more opportunities like that where data centers are actually building where the power is.
Yes.
Because power is becoming the constraint. Invariably, it's been about, because the reason they're closer to metros is to do with the network or the fiber and the latency in that, like the time it takes the data to travel. But they're trying to overcome some of those things to put data centers in locations like that. And then, okay, so sorry, Madri, I'm going to stick with you again because there was something else that you half touched on, which I want to build on, is data sovereignty. Whether we're talking about government data sovereignty, personal data sovereignty, and then I'll get to you as well, Sidisi. Where do you see it, and where do you see it coming up with regards to a finance and a legal point of view? Yeah, you can. Okay.
Let me speak on a legal point of view. Of course, data is a sensitive topic, especially with the government, and data sovereignty means is looking at how the government treats data that is generated in a country, and how to protect that data in terms of can you hold data physically data residency versus are you able to hold that data in another country that belongs to another country? And it's become a very national security interest issue. So we're seeing a lot of governments being very cautious about allowing data being held in a data center in another country. So it's something that can be enhanced, but there needs to be balance between the security of that data and enhancing the economic argument in terms of what is affordable, in terms of what the capex considerations of the location and the power and the cost of land. So I think governments are thinking about how do you balance those two competing interests in terms of the cost of putting up the data center and holding data of a different country. For example, I know in Kenya we have e-Citizen, which is the main government portal for all government services. But can you hold that data in another country? So it's a balance, and governments are still cautious in enhancing data sovereignty laws. Yeah.
And then, Sadisi, do you see customers or clients who are looking to pushing for this in their projects yet, or is it still a thing you don't see much of?
So, I mean, I guess from a financing perspective, just maybe to take it there is
Yes.
what's quite critical to us is cash flows, right? So when we're looking at funding or looking at any data center opportunities, it's quite important to understand those data protection laws, because it gives you a fair sense of comfort that if the law requires that you keep data onshore, the developers will look to obviously provide a service to the players in the market. And then from a cash flow perspective, you take comfort that they can't up and leave and take their data offshore because they're regulated to keep it onshore. So it gives you that insight into the cash flow. So that's where the opportunity then lies for the banks and the developers, because now you're able to follow the cash flow stream to make it a bankable case.
Okay. All right, so let's maybe get on to AI a bit, and that's the topic that everyone seems to want to talk about. Shamsa, where are you seeing that impact data centers at the moment? Are you seeing that in any of the projects you guys are working on at the moment? Is it a driver, or is it just talk, or what are your views?
So definitely AI goes hand in hand with the data center development and its offerings by the global clients. So as a Turner and Townsend, we are involved in almost all the big global data center projects, delivering and managing their projects. So definitely we can see there is an impact. On the AI side, definitely if we look at the AI workload requirements, especially the generative AI, that on an average needs more than 10 times the energy what a usual IT infrastructure needs. So having seen the projects where we are involved, definitely the power requirement and the connection and availability is an important aspect. And looking at the AI contribution in the society and for the government GDP in a best case scenario, should government proactively implement all the gaps on the infrastructure side, regulatory side, AI has a potential to contribute in maybe $1 trillion, GDP for Africa, and that will bring Africa competing with its global stakeholders where they are leading the data center aspect. So definitely there is a demand, but we need to appreciate there is a gap on our side, and a joint collaboration with, as I said, government, fraternity, public-private is required to make AI be more impactful, whether it's in the education sector, whether it's in the banking finance sector, whether it's in the irrigation or agriculture sector. So AI, if managed properly, is going to impact all these aspects and the sectors.
Okay, so the next question was going to be, so I think you've touched on it, where do you see, maybe thinking about the audience who's developers and architects and other project managers, where do you see the opportunity in data centers in Africa in the next couple of years?
So if you look at the current stature, so Africa holds around 1 to 2% of data center capacity, global data center capacity, of which half of them are concentrated in South Africa. So definitely the key metropolitans which are on a fast economic growth, there is a huge potential of data center applicability. We can already see traction from global technical giants and investors, whether it's in Kenya, Nigeria, of course, South Africa, and in terms of subsea cable, what my colleague just mentioned. So definitely these metro is going to be the first choice in terms of the availability of the infrastructure, government focus, and most important, the population density, where on an average, Africa's internet traffic is going to increase by 45% annually, which will be driven by these metro cities. So definitely that is the main hubs or the areas where data centers will be, we can see in the near future. And especially if you look at the small scales, whether it's co-location or edge data, this will be centered. And if you talk about the enterprise or hyperscale, they will also prefer to be in close proximity of these metros, obviously because of the benefits and the facilities that they get. But definitely these cities are going to drive the data center industry.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, in that in the big metros, we will see the co-location providers build data centers. So that'll be the Africa data centers, the Equinexes, the Digital Realties. And then the hyperscalers, as in the Amazons, the Googles, the Microsofts, they'll probably, as they say, co-locate in those for a while. They'll build some of their own data centers, but I think we're a while off that. And so, DC, where do you think you see the opportunity in the next few years? Where do you see it coming with your crystal ball?
So with my crystal ball and what I've seen currently, I'm seeing it in the metros, as mentioned. So we're seeing, speaking from East Africa's perspective, I've seen some opportunities pop up around the Nairobi area and the industrial areas, which is quite interesting. Seeing some activity out in Tanzania as well as more. So I think the key markets on the continent are going to be where we're going to see the initial pickup, and then I think the rest of the regions will start to follow.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's get on to power, because that is, as we talked about at the start, with data centers getting bigger and bigger, it's not so much about getting land now, it's about getting land and power. So I might ask you all the same question, in that, how do we successfully get enough power to our sites? And obviously it's very different in different markets, but maybe talk to your experience and a little bit about how you see it succeeding, say, in South Africa or markets you're looking at the moment.
So if you look from Africa perspective, definitely depending on the type and scale of data center. So if we are talking on the edge or the co-location one there, the key aspect of power is the reliability and the availability, and that brings down to the developer or the operator having a proper coordination and alignment with the distribution utility. When it comes to the hyperscale, where you can easily see at least 100 megawatt plus, so there an early engagement with the regulators, the power utilities, doing a proper network feasibility studies to assure that grid has enough capacity and it's not constrained. And if there is a constraint, then there needs to be a robust plan on having its own generation. That brings to aligning with the government bodies for a land, permits. So the key to such success, based on what we are seeing and that is required, is early engagement, having a robust plan and feasibility. And the most thing in Africa that is required is having engagement with the society, investing in the local capability development, so that in long run the industry is well prepared to tackle the skill gap aspect.
Yeah, I agree. And then I think the only thing I'd add to that is, where available, and it is available in quite a few countries, is engage with an IPP renewables so that you've got some option. You might not necessarily do it on day one, but at least have a plan because that makes your project more bankable. And then, Marjorie, how are you seeing any projects come to you now which are data center and power together? Because traditionally we would have done them separately. We would have selected the sites and then the data center would have come along and then he would have got the power. Are you seeing any projects where they're trying to do it all together, or is it still seen as two separate tasks?
Yeah, I've seen that they're doing now the power and the data center partnerships together. I think I even saw something in South Africa where there's a power generating company and a data center developer who are sharing 50-50 in that project. And as mentioned before, we've seen Microsoft also in Kenya putting up a power plant and a data center at all carrier. So it's something that is happening, and Kenya is open to independent power producers. So especially like in the special economic zones, they don't rely so much on the national grid, but they create their own grid. So it's very easy to set up a data center and build or partner with a power company to build your own independent power plant to service the data center. So I think going forward, it's not just to think about the national grid, but building your own grid. Of course, the capex is much higher, and that's where the financing opportunity comes in for finance institutions like Standard Bank and other banks and institutional financing companies to think about partnering as a JV partner in those deals, because as we've discussed, the demand is quite the supply has outstripped demand.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then same question for you, Sidisi. Are you seeing any, from a finance point of view, seeing these deals come together?
So I'll echo my colleague's sentiment. Where I've seen is where the precincts that the guys have built in is where the reliance is not purely on the national grid. There's already backup power, and themselves, the developers, when they come in, they also provide themselves an additional layer just to ensure that they don't have any issues given the requirement of data center and the power. The reason, and it has to stay constant. Yeah.
Okay. I think we've got 5 minutes left, so I might. Okay. Any questions? Great. Any questions? Awesome. So we've got 2 minutes. Do you guys got any parting thoughts? Have you gone through everything, Shamsi? Got anything? Parting. Any last words of wisdom?
So what I would mention before closing, that in general, for global fraternity, there is a misconception that Africa lacks skills, and to build such a high capital-intensive projects, you need to parachute skills, manpower from overseas. But in reality, Africa is blessed with high-skilled resources, but at the same time, it has challenge on the liquidity and capital. So definitely there needs to be a balanced coordination between public and private fraternity to manage the expectation of global players who will support Africa to excel in its digital transformation. So that I would suggest.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I don't think Africa's got a talent problem. We've got a training problem. As in, we've got plenty of people. We're just not training enough of them. Margie, any last words?
Just to say that since these projects are capital intensive, and maybe one of the considerations that teams should think about is the legal and tax structuring of these deals, just to ensure that the investment that is being put into the projects, how do you extract it, and is there an optimized or a favorable legal or tax position that can be adopted, and that's an added layer to your considerations, even as you're thinking about the cost of land, the cost of power. and their talent, then think about getting advisors to give you the best legal and tax structure for such a project.
I agree. And then, Santishi, you got...
My parting shot would be data centers, the development data centers are not only for the operators. So to the developers in the room, if they're looking to have an alternative asset as they expand their portfolios, there is an opportunity for them to JV. And again, from a lender's perspective, we are and actively participate. So there is, I guess, liquidity from a financial institution side to support the sector.
Great, I agree. Great. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you everyone. I hope you enjoyed that.